Hello, everybody. My name is Gurevich, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Velocity Network Foundation. I'm delighted to open this session and tell you a little bit about our work at the foundation. Velocity Network represents the most ambitious collaborative endeavor ever undertaken by labor market stakeholders. We have over 80 organizations that are actively collaborating to reinvent how education and career credentials are shared across the labor market. Most of these organizations, those member companies, are HR and education software vendors. But in addition, we have also employer and education associations, staffing industry association, and other global nonprofit and multilateral organizations representing large job market stakeholder groups. This community, by the way, features software vendors that serve over 30% of employers worldwide, streamlining employment-related process for a global audience. Now, imagine if we could revolutionize education and career records by transforming them into tamper-proof, cryptographically secured, and most importantly, trusted career credentials. These credentials would be curated directly by individuals from primary source authorities like their past employers, their school, university, training vendor, and so on and so forth. The individuals will own and store them privately and can share them across multiple use cases when they need to prove their qualifications. This self-sovereign career identity represents the long-awaited great transformer of the global labor market. It will redefine how individuals navigate their careers, livelihoods, and how human capital development and deployment are managed in general. And this is the Velocity Network. What we've built is a utility layer that no single entity controls, yet anyone can use, a public infrastructure, a purpose-built protocol and blockchain network for education and career credentials. The network is deliberately tech agnostic, intentionally designed for effortless integration by any software vendor or solution provider. And the decentralized protocol, the blockchain network, and the developer-ready APIs are all built under an open source framework and serve as a public utility, fully extensible across labor and education markets and adjacent use cases. Vendors can leverage these open source tools to easily build solutions, seamlessly integrating interoperable credentials issuance and verification for their customers on top of Velocity Network as the utility layer. And it's live. It's already here. And in the last few months since the launch of Velocity Mainnet, this initiative has gained impressive traction and sparked enthusiasm across the work tech and ad tech industries. We have a growing community of over 70 leading software vendors to the worlds of work and education that are engaged in building use cases on top of Velocities. Over 700,000 individuals already use career credential wallets on Velocity to store and share millions of credentials issued to them by primary sources. We're on track to surpass the 1 million user mark by year end, aiming for 10 million users by 2024. And I always say that there are not many opportunities to join early to something that will change the world. This is one of these rare opportunities. So I want to thank you for listening. I wish you a productive session, and back to you, Ollie.
Hello, I'm Ollie Henderson, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to our first panel of the day. And the focus of this panel is exploring how we can get people into the right jobs faster. Joining me to discuss this are three people who represent some of the employers embracing verifiable digital credentials and can speak to the problems they help solve and the opportunities they help create. I've got Alex Chudnovsky, Vice President of Product Strategy at SAP, Mike Andrus, Vice President of Shared Operations at HCA Healthcare, and Daigle, President of Precheck, a cited company. So Mike, let's start with you. You work for HCA. It's one of the largest healthcare organizations globally. Can you tell us why it's so important that institutions give people their data in a verifiable credential format? What are some of the benefits from an employment perspective?
Thanks, Ollie. Yeah, I think the big driver for HCA is we're a large healthcare organization within the U.S. We have over 300,000 colleagues around the country, and we hire upwards of 100,000 colleagues a year. Our big challenge is how do we get caregivers to the bedside as quickly as possible? And our onboarding process is one of those opportunities to really streamline. So we view these pre-verified credentials as really a way to remove friction from that onboarding process and accelerate our ability to get those caregivers to the bedside quickly.
And we'll hear from Zach and Alex in a moment, kind of how they relate to some of the similar challenges that HCA face. But I mean, what are the biggest points of friction right now? You know, what typically causes those delays which prevent people getting into the roles more quickly?
Yeah, so, you know, verifying someone's work history, going back and verifying where all they've worked, right? They can put anything on their resume. Our goal is to really find out what was their experience and their reasons for leaving prior employment, as well as education verification. And so we see education as a huge opportunity there to streamline that onboarding process and getting educational institutions on board with pre-verified credentials, utilizing organizations like Velocity Network to take that long pole out of the tent, so to speak, in that onboarding process is a huge opportunity for us.
Right, and Zach, as a background screener, your business verifies people's personal data. Tell us about the work you're currently doing with verifiable credentials and why you're excited about the opportunities they unlock.
Yeah, so Precheck, which is a Cisive company, serves the U.S. healthcare market exclusively, and so we serve about 37 of the top 50 health systems in the U.S. today, including HCA. And we've had CHROs and people in Mike's role coming to us for years saying, look, we've got to find a way to bend the curve, to get on-time starts at a higher rate. And we see that static attributes like education verification records and past work experience are the long poles in the tent. When we look at all the data across the healthcare, background screening space, it's very clear that that's where the delays are happening. And these organizations are understaffed many times, under-resourced to get the verifications out the door at the scale at which they have to today. And so verifiable credentials and providing a way for us to inspect those credentials in a seamless way for our healthcare customers is critically important to bending that curve. And we think that if educational institutions and primary sources will step forward and participate in this, companies like us that are participating with Velocity Network will be able to seamlessly provide that instant verification for our clients, which they so covet and really demand right now with the talent shortages they're facing in nursing, especially. We think that it's going to improve the ecosystem for everyone, including those people who are holding the records, getting the jobs faster, as Mike said, getting to the bedside sooner and helping patients receive the care that they need. So we really want educational institutions to step forward and participate.
And Alex, SAP is a very well-known name for many of us. Perhaps you could explain how you envisage Velocity being integrated into major technology platforms such as HR information systems. Why is it important to be enabled for the exchange of verifiable digital credentials?
Yeah, just also, hi, good to be here. But to Mike's comment earlier, we're a technology company with over 100,000 people. We're in 80 plus countries. We see over 1 million resumes or applicants every year. Going through that volume, you have to parse out a certain amount. And when you get to a certain stage where you do have to spend time with the applicants to understand how much of technology they understand, there's no licensing for tech workers that we can maybe look at, rely like in healthcare. It becomes a pretty cumbersome process, and we are competing for talent quite a bit, especially with some of the new technologies that are coming out. We do see verifiable credentials just changing the experience, both for the applicant and the hiring manager. Wouldn't it be great being on a call or meeting the person for the first time and having check mark to see, yes, you've done this, you've worked there. Just changes the whole experience from that. We also serve, thousands of customers around the world. They're employing, large number of people, millions of people. They go through the same thing in every industry. So just figuring out a way how to even cut down the process of an applicant coming in and having that experience, being able to evaluate their skills, and then making the experience with a hiring manager just so much seamless. I think verifiable credentials play a key role in that. To your question, how to enable this, I think it's, now that Velocity is fully functioning, right? And It's getting people to understand why they need this. It's getting the employers understanding how much easier their lives will be, both from hiring and even internal mobility. I think that's a key element. And us coming all together as members with Precheck and Mike from HCA and all of our customers that will be joining, I think having this technology in place will fundamentally change how people join an organization.
I'm gonna open this to anybody who'd like to take it, but you know, I know a big conversation, an important conversation that we're having with all members and stakeholders within the Velocity Network community, and certainly within the education community, is about interoperability. I mean, what perhaps you could explain to those who aren't as familiar with that term, or how that relates to this this part of the industry. What's important to interoperability? What are steps towards ensuring that you know, we can talk to one another, the systems can talk to one another, and can effectively you know, work together to speed up that hiring and onboarding process? Anybody want to take that?
Yeah, maybe I can start. Being an HR or tech provider, we have our notable peers in the industry, right? That also run both core HR systems, learning systems, recruiting systems. When an applicant comes to one of our customers, it shouldn't matter what system the prior employers used, or how the data at a university sits, or how does some governing body manages their licenses. We just want to be able to consume that data and help through whatever that process goes on. So that's really the interoperability term, that an individual can bring their credentials regardless of what the system was used in the past, that we can read it, others can read it if it comes out of our system or came out of our system. Just makes the process so much seamless, and less worrying about standards, right? I think that's the key piece that's slowing us down for making these experiences great for HSA or other customers, right? They're trying to figure out, if even starting with a paper document, right? We used to receive faxes, and by mail resumes would come in, and we'd have to scan them and parse them and do all that fun stuff. At least now, hopefully they're digitally being uploaded, but it still doesn't break the gap of verifying that information. So interoperability is really making sure that we can read it and others can read data that came out of our system.
Yeah, I think also it allows companies who, whether you're a technology business, you're an employer, you're a tech-enabled service provider along the continuum, to know that the investments you're making along this continuum to provide solutions will be lasting and sustainable differentiators for your business, because interoperability allows us to go to the very top of the candidate waterfall, have the applied process be augmented with applying digitally, have that record flow down, excuse me, to the core HR systems, to the background screening providers for decision making, and back into the HR systems for internal mobility purposes and succession planning. So for all of us in the ecosystem to leverage the full value of this, interoperability is absolutely key, and to do it at the scale that it needs to be done at as well. And I think also for consumers to get adoption going, is that nobody wants to have to get 10 different wallets and 10 different experiences, and whoever the wallet providers are that prevail, making sure that the data that's flowing across these technologies and through these services is interoperable, I think is absolutely key to full adoption, and for us to all get all the value out of this that we need to.
Yeah, thanks. And Mike, kind of coming back full circle to your first point, what we're talking about here is getting people into important roles quickly. So, for HCA, you're verifying individual qualifications and credentials, could be a doctor, a nurse, or other healthcare professionals. So again, I guess from looking at it from the point of view of how education institutions and issuers of qualifications, certifications could think about this and think about interoperability, tell us how you approached it in the past, and why this is shifting the way that education institutions can contribute towards this process, and ultimately, help organizations like HCA get people in those important roles quickly.
Yeah, well, I think as Alex and Zach have commented earlier, right, as a consumer of this data, HCA shouldn't have to choose between the technology platform that would enable this capability. And so when we think about the kind of the primary sources that are issuing these credentials, whether it's an education institution, a licensing organization, certifications that are acquired by our colleagues throughout the course of their career, really this interoperability takes that friction, allowing these individuals to kind of own their own credentials, right? Own their work history, own their license or certification, and then choose to share that with either current or prospective employers. And so that's where we see this really, the capabilities here, the opportunity ahead for streamlining and getting those caregivers into the organization and getting them into those patient care roles quickly is through the capabilities of a universal platform that is not technology or vendor specific to facilitate the transfer of this information.
Now the Velocity network, it's live. We have people issuing on the network, and of course, there are very many members who are innovating in the space. They're looking at different use cases across education and employment. I'm interested from each of your perspective, what kinds of innovation you can imagine in the work tech space once verifiable credentials become more common. I mean, ultimately, you hope they become ubiquitous, but certainly as adoption increases and more people are able to access and utilize verifiable credentials, what kind of innovations are immediately spring to mind, which are going to facilitate the removal of friction in the hiring process, and also, as Alex suggested, perhaps improve internal mobility within organizations too?
Well, one of the innovations we look, I'll go back to internal mobility, is we're building a talent hub within our application that we want to be able to help with this internal mobility, right? One of the best folks that you can put in a new role is folks that are, familiar with your culture, how the company works. Understanding what they've done and their job is doable today, right? Because we have the data, we have the feedback from managers, peers, and others. But to really build out that whole view of the individual, there's lots of external sources. So they might be taking courses, they might be changing and adding new skills. Their prior, experiences or even their community participation is very critical to help them make that change to a new role. So bringing in what we already know about them while they're employed at the company and understanding what they're doing externally, if they can enhance their career profile, is significantly helping with people finding new jobs or identifying people that might be good at their particular jobs. And this will become very critical when skills will be super measured, right? So there's no diplomas for skills necessarily, right? Those skills come maybe from your daily activities, maybe operating a particular machine, or maybe in your case, how many patients or how many procedures have been completed. That upgrades the individual skills. How do we capture that, help the individual to have that internal mobility? So that's one of the key innovations that we're looking at.
Yeah, I think also turning experiences and micro-credentials, all of the different facts about an individual into machine-readable, digitally verifiable records, and then creating solutions that allow us to curate that information for predictive analytics, longitudinal thinking and studies. It's just so much more data can be consumed. And think about all the places today that are self-reported elements about people, attributes, if you will, becoming facts that are primary source verifiable to the standards of the Joint Commission, the accrediting bodies. It changes the entire game. And I think there's probably more innovation coming that we haven't even thought about yet, because we barely scratched the surface. That when you have, in this Web 3.0 world that we're moving to, where everything's machine readable, we have the interoperability, and self-reported information is turned into fact, and you have certainty around that information. I think the opportunities are endless. And I think you're going to see management solutions for like license verification and keeping people compliant becoming enforcement solutions tied to even the proximity card readers, making sure that people that are on the ICU or working in labor delivery, have a license that's in good standing at that moment in time before providing care. And we plan to play a significant role in that continuum. But I think the innovation possibilities are really endless.
Yeah, I mean,
I think the other.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, another area of innovation that will come, maybe not quite there yet, is I think with everything that's happening with AI right now, the way AI will be used in HR tech and of course everywhere else. AI will help with job descriptions and the whole process of identifying. It'll be doing a lot of different things. People will also use that. Applicants will use AI to apply for jobs as well. So I think verifiable credentials will become super important for a couple of reasons. One, making sure we really can tell that the individual has the qualifications that they claim to be in a very quick manner. I think that the second one is we need to make sure AI is using data and verified data when it makes any type of recommendations. And the sources of that data need to be super secure. So we can't have an AI go in and make any type of recommendation or maybe a ranking or anything like that when it's evaluating candidates or people. It needs to protect the data privacy of the individual. It needs to make sure that it's not just basing or has some kind of a bias. That will have to be anchored by credentials, verified credentials. So that's an area where these two worlds will collide, and I think it will help both HR tech adopt AI and also verifiable credentials become a lot more important in the future.
And I think from an employee perspective as well, or as a candidate, from a candidate's perspective, right, having control over these credentials specifically, whether it's in a digital wallet or direct access to this kind of the Web 3.0 infrastructure, but having control over their data in terms of their being able to choose when and how to share it, and with either their current employer or prospective employers, I think there's a kind of an add-on to Alex's comments there around the security of this data, but ultimately empowering those that own the data to make those decisions versus having, information loosely out on the internet or, posting resumes out there that can be searched indiscriminately by various technology platforms. So ultimately, this gives that empowerment back to the employee as well.
Yeah. Yeah, just a personal anecdote. My son, he's 11. He's about to start high school. We went for a talk at his prospective high school the other day, and the principal led the talk by explaining to parents that, when we left school, there was this idea of the three-stage life. You'd leave education, you'd get a job, and you'd retire at the end of it. And then, of course, what we're in now is this multi-stage life where we are constantly having to learn and adapt. And the adoption of these new technologies and particular AI, which again he mentioned, is completely changing the way we think about learning and skills. And it is a fascinating evolution, I think, for all of us to adapt to, including education institutions, learning management systems, and everyone in between. We haven't got too long left, but I think with that in mind, our audience is full of institutions and organizations thinking carefully about how individual learners benefit from their skills and experience. What's one ask you'd make of potential issuers to contribute towards creating this rich digital credentialing ecosystem, which we can, perhaps envisage improving the way that we teach and learn and work?
So for education or organizations, I think when somebody graduates, right, or completes a particular course, the diploma, certificate, transcripts are issued. But to Zach's earlier point, I think while somebody's learning, there's a lot of micro-learning experiences, projects, things that they do hands-on that are, I think, critical for earlier talent. And I think if there's a way to capture that and provide that to future employers, it opens it up the possibilities. You might be applying for one job, but we actually think that you should try out for another job, right? Just because you have other experiences that might not be reflective in a diploma or in your transcript. So having that wealth of information come from an individual of what they've accomplished and the little things that they've done, in micro-credentials, I think would be very beneficial for future employers.
Yeah, I would double down on that, you know, every experience that those students are getting along that curriculum, whether it's didactic or traditional training, is those micro-credentials are so valuable and important for them. And if you can enable them to utilize what they're gaining along that journey and not just at the very end of it as an exclamation point when they graduate, they can benefit in internships, you know, seeking other jobs, becoming more well-rounded for you know, a really diverse labor market they're going to be going into. And also you're setting them up to learn about owning their own career credentials and really owning their own destiny from the logical starting point of this process. And it doesn't have to be when they graduate. It can be when they enroll and when they get started. And I think introducing them to digital career wallets is a big benefit for them. And it's going to help them to have the access to the right opportunities at the right time. And so you'll be setting them up for success.
And just a quick, Ollie, you mentioned high school. I have a freshman, and he's joining clubs, business clubs, science clubs. I think that's already a start to a career to some extent. We don't know what he will go to and what college, but high school is already laying down that foundation, that secondary education, the beginning of what they'll do. And having those credentials already, I think that's a start for, like you said, internships or any other opportunities, summer jobs, right? That will be super helpful. So maybe education organization can start even earlier in the high school days.
Yeah, and I would just say, you know, operating in a highly regulated industry as well, I think education institutions taking this initiative and getting out in front and helping to pave the way versus waiting for regulation to catch up to education and demand this from education institutions. I think we're in a really good opportunity here, timing wise, for educational institutions to really take the lead on this versus waiting for the industry to come to them and demand a migration to new technology platforms.
Brilliant. Well, Alex, Mike, Zach, thanks so much for your contribution today. I really appreciate it. I'm going to hand over to Etan now, who's actually going to be able to demo what it means to be able to collect and share verifiable credentials in a digital wallet. So thanks very much for your contribution.
Thanks, Ollie. I'm going to take you through a short demonstration of the experience of an individual as she interacts with her education institution, licensing body, and potential employers using a digital wallet in a fully interoperable world of verifiable credentials on the Velocity network. My demonstration today presents the Velocity Career Wallet, but I want to emphasize that the Velocity network is wallet agnostic, enabling individuals to choose from a wide range of mobile wallets and web wallets, all of which enable the individuals to receive credentials from every issuer on the network and share credentials with any relying party on the network. I want to introduce you to Vanessa. Vanessa is a young professional who has recently completed her bachelor's degree and earned her registered nursing license in the state of Texas. Let's see how Vanessa claims her degree and license as verifiable credentials and then applies to jobs using these credentials. The first step for Vanessa and for any user on any wallet on the Velocity network is to verify her identity. This is critical for trust on the network, ensuring that any organization that Vanessa interacts with is confident they are actually interacting with her. Vanessa has performed a two-factor authentication to verify her email and her phone number, and then went through an identity verification process to verify her driver's license for the state of Texas. Now that Vanessa has her identity credentials in her wallet, she's ready to claim her bachelor's degree in nursing. Vanessa graduated from Texas Women's University, so she'll go into education, claim a new career credential, and search the registry for Texas Women's University. When she's found her university, she'll submit her request to them, and the Texas Women's University will ask for identity. Texas Women's University is asking for her email, her phone number, and a driver's license. Vanessa shares those, reads the terms and conditions, and shares her identity credentials. Texas Women's University receives that data, looks Vanessa up on their systems, and makes an offer to Vanessa of her degree. Vanessa can check the offer, ensure that it has the correct information, and once she's ensured that it has, accept that credential. And now she's getting that credential transferred to her wallet, and you can now see it in her education section. Now that Vanessa has her degree, she's ready to claim her license from the Texas Board of Nursing. She'll go into licenses and certifications, claim a new credential, search for Texas Board of Nursing, and connect their wallet to their system. Again, the Texas Board of Nursing is asking for email, phone, and driver's licenses or identity. She'll share those credentials, accept the terms and conditions, and share her identity. Her identity is transferred to the Texas Board of Nursing, who will look her up in the system, identify that she has a Texas nursing license, and Vanessa can check the offer of the Texas nursing license, verify that it's correct and complete, and then accept it to her wallet. Now the text that Vanessa has both her education degree and her nursing license, in addition to her identity and her phone, she's ready to start looking for her first job opportunity. Vanessa searches the web for job opportunities and goes to HCA's website and searches for opportunities in nearby her hometown of Austin, Texas. On HCA's website, she finds this opportunity for a medical surgical neuro-registered nurse at St. David's South Medical Center in Austin, Texas. Great, perfect. Now she will scan the QR code on the wallet and basically get a disclosure request from HCA Healthcare. As you can see, HCA is asking Vanessa for a few pieces of information in order to apply to her job. They're asking for identity. Let's just share only her email for our example here. They're asking for education. We'll share her bachelor's degree in Texas Women's University. She has no employment history, so she can't share a credential of her employment history, but she has her Texas Board of Nursing license, so she'll add that. Once she's selected all the credentials she wants to add, she'll accept the terms and conditions and share those. Her wallet is verifying that she indeed intended in sharing those 3 out of those 5 credentials. She's confirmed, and that's it. Vanessa has applied to HCA. Her wallet has also captured a history, a record of that disclosure. You can see here she applied to HCA for this, and if you go in, she can see exactly what credentials she shared with Texas Women's University and what terms and conditions she agreed to. Great. Now Vanessa discovers another job opportunity, this time with a clinic, a small clinic that doesn't have a job board on its website, and directs candidates to submit an email with a CV attached to the clinic's office manager. Vanessa wants to provide her verifiable credentials as part of the application. To do so, she clicks on the export button here at the top of the wallet and builds a presentation, just like she shared, and selecting specific criteria, just like she shared with HCA. So she'll share her email and phone, in this case, her education from Texas Women's University, and license, great, and share those. Once she does so, her wallet creates a deep link and a QR code, which she can copy and paste into her resume or CV and include in her cover letter to share with the clinic. When the clinic receives this, the clinic can scan the QR code or click on the link and verify the credentials of Vanessa shared with them on the Velocity Universal Verification Service, a website that's available to anyone and does not require any technical integration. That concludes our short demo. Thanks. Back to you, Ollie.
And I'm very pleased to welcome our second panel of the day. And the focus of this panel is exploring why we need to adopt a unified approach to verifying education and skills. And helping me do this are our 3 panelists. First, Kacey Thorne from Western Governors University, Meagan Treadway from Grand Valley Next Ed Collab, and Mike Simmons from AACRAO. So why don't I get you guys to introduce yourselves? So perhaps you could tell us what you do in the credentialing ecosystem and maybe a little bit into why putting credentials in learners' hands is so important. Mike, would you like to start?
I will. I work with AACRAO, which is the American Association of Collegiate Registrars and Admissions Officers. And so in the name itself, you can imagine why we are involved with credentials. Registrars have been for 100 and some years issuing credentials on behalf of institutions, et cetera. And so this is just a natural evolution for us, moving from the old transcript to the new versions of innovative credentials.
Brilliant. Meagan, you're next on my Zoom page.
Sure, thank you. Yes, Meagan Treadway with Grand Valley State University's Next Ed Co-Lab. We are essentially like a think tank for the university, creating new pathways to and through the university through following co-laboratory design principles. And so we saw this as a project worthy of looking into for numerous reasons. First, higher education has a reputation for slow evolution, right? That must change, particularly at the rate of change occurring around us in the different sectors as that's increasing. To remain relevant, to continue to fulfill our mission, we must be more adaptable than we have historically. Also, it's in alignment with the type of future everyone is expecting, right? You may have heard of the term Web 3.0 or Web 3, which is meant to be decentralized, open to everyone, and built on top of a network of meaningfully linked data, right? And finally, because it's the right thing to do. If we had more time, we could get into a longer conversation about equity, but as an institution of higher education, our mission, right, is to prepare learners for their future. So A, we must ensure they can make sense of the learning they have undergone and show how it can be applied to the next step they desire to take in life. And B, why would we hold any of that information hostage?
Brilliant, thank you. Kacey, tell us about WGU.
Great, thank you. So good morning. I am in California this morning, so nice and early. I am the Senior Director of Skills Architecture for Western Governors University, and we are a fully online competency-based organization. We have approximately 165,000 students currently enrolled. It shifts every month, so that's a wonderful thing. For us in skills architecture and at WGU, the reason that we are really focused on skills in particular is because we believe that to be the language that can bridge the gap between employers and education institutions. And we want to make sure that our learners are primed with that language. So my work primarily in a learning and employment record ecosystem ensures that the programs that we are building, the skills are evident and transparent to our learners from a human readable standpoint, but then also from a machine readable and actionable standpoint.
Yeah, and I understand your work with the Open Skills Network's largely been focused on the semantic layer. I mean, maybe you could explain what that is and why it's so important when we talk about a skills-based economy and verifiable credentials.
Absolutely. So when I think of the semantic layer, I think about it from both the machine readable as well as the human readable side. So in higher ed, we don't do a great job of helping our learners understand what their credentials actually represent in terms of the high value skills that they've demonstrated in order to earn those credentials. So by way of the work of WGU and the Open Skills Network, we are really championing the use of open skills taxonomies. That stuff should not be in walled gardens. It should be open so that we're making sure that every individual has the ability to thrive and communicate about those skills. So within an LER ecosystem, we make sure all of the digital achievements and records that we have those skills embedded so that our students understand what it is and can communicate about that effectively. On the flip side of things, we also have to have machine readable and machine actionable. So within the digital credentials, we actually have skills represented as a tiny little data package that I call a rich skills descriptor. And within that data package, there is a lot of information about the skill and performance, about industry certifications, about academic certifications that it aligns to. And it's all authored in a syntax that is both machine readable and actionable so it can be consumed effectively within an LER ecosystem. And that's a big piece of the work that WGU has done and a lot of what the Open Skills Network is championing.
If you don't mind, I'd like to link what Kacey just said with what Meagan said, and it has to do with higher education and the need to change. Higher education does not do well with skills language, and that's why the work that the Open Skills Network and institutions are doing is important. We speak, especially as registrars, in terms of grades, in terms of things that don't really translate or inform students about their learning. And to change these requires systematic change. You just don't go from giving a student an A to giving a full-fledged skills-based record without the help of infrastructure. And one of those infrastructures that seems to head in this direction is the Velocity Network, for example. Higher education cannot do this internally. And so as a result, there has to be ways and incentives to move into these skills-based records more so than we're doing now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to add to the discussion around semantics, there even exists debate from one university to another, right? When there are courses with similar titles and descriptions as to what skills have been gained. So if one of the goals of digital credentials is for learners to be able to share their achievements quickly, easily, and more broadly, that information needs to be ingested quickly and easily, regardless of where or to whom that information is being shared, right? And so institutions can no longer afford to exist in their own silo apart from each other. And we most definitely will not succeed if we are still viewed as some sort of ivory tower. So we must become more integrated in the practicalities of the world around us. And to do so, we all need to be speaking in common language and have a shared understanding.
Cheers to that. Yes.
And Meagan, I know one of your priorities is adopting a kind of a rapid approach to issuing credentials. And I think you're sort of starting, you mentioned there and touched on it, but you're starting with degree credentials and sort of building out the credentialing strategy from there. So I'm interested specifically, what made you choose to work with Velocity to help you reach those goals?
Sure. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, any evolution like this can seem monstrous, right? And true, the breadth of the work required should not be taken lightly. However, there are small pieces that can be done at a time and a methodological approach to doing so, right? So breaking the process down into small bites that can be implemented rapidly helps to get the whole process off the ground in a relatively painless way and allows one to make headway on the larger project that might otherwise seem intimidating. So I reached out to Velocity because Velocity has already done a lot of this work for us, right? So they've taken on the work of thinking about and designing systems with common goals such as interoperability. They've also done the work of breaking down the overall process into some smaller pieces and steps and are a valuable thought partner to anyone who is wanting to take the step towards digital credentials. So if you're like me and you're finding a need for expert advice, Velocity is where you can connect and learn from those who have come before you.
And the title of this panel is taking a unified approach, and obviously we talk about interoperability. What does that mean in practice? I think again, Kacey, you've touched on it, but having a kind of very mobile approach to the way that people can use their credentials globally. Where did interoperability and all of these issues come into it? And I suppose what are the first steps that education institutions and organizations need to take in ensuring that we work in this unified way?
So from my perspective, when I think about interoperability, it is so much more than just how digital achievements, credentials for our learners will port between systems. It's how can they actually effectively use those to transition from one opportunity to another. So there's the machine piece of this, but I also think when it comes to interoperability, there's a lot of that human piece as well, making sure that learners are equipped with the language that they need to be able to represent their own talent brand in their most effective way, that higher ed institutions are able to speak to one another in terms of achievements that go beyond matching course names and titles, but really understand more deeply the skills that someone is bringing to the table, both within a higher ed setting or not. And then I also think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of making credentials more interoperable for use across settings. So how can we let someone come to a higher ed environment and get credit where credit is due for those skills that they've built up across a lifetime of work and learning? So in as much as the semantic layer is a very important and critical component to that in a digital system, there's a lot more to interoperability than I think a lot of us tend to recognize.
We use a statement related to interoperability. Let me read it to you because I think it kind of sums up. It says interoperability must support combinations of data from multiple sources, enable human interoperability, and here's the key point: be understood by people in different occupations and industries from diverse backgrounds. So it covers, and obviously as keepers of the systems in the institutions, we worry a lot about technical interoperability, but that's just the easy part, in my opinion. That can be solved, and I think Velocity has demonstrated some of that already. It's just something that if you're committed to doing it, the tech's not the problem. It's the systems and the people and semantics that turn out to be the problem. In case you're shaking your head, because we've talked about this for a long time.
Yeah, and presumably, look, I mean, sorry, go on, Meagan.
Well, I was just going to add that, right, when you're implementing something this evolutionary or this massive, right, you want to make sure it's going to be of benefit to all involved. So I don't think that it's selfish at all to think about the benefits to the institutions as well, right, in conjunction with our students in the workforce. So, I mean, just think about how the shrinking number of high school graduates has been a conversation for higher education for the last several years. So for this reason, we've been trying to expand demographically, right, beyond your kind of traditional 18 to 24-year-old students. So the conversation around degree completion and upskilling for adult learners and the need to understand the skills and knowledge that they are bringing with them is of importance on its own, much like Kacey described. But additionally, advances in technology means we're no longer place-bound when delivering our services, right? And our students are no longer place-bound when looking for employment. So for this reason, we need to ensure our learners' experiences with us will be transferable and translatable if they are to be of use to them. But we must also be able to accept credential information if we are going to also expand our geographic reach for students as well. So the interoperability, and then, right, just we've been talking about it for a while, this need to kind of expand your world a little bit, right? And so I think the touching on the globally mobile aspect of it is a really important piece of the conversation as well.
Yeah, I'm interested because, as you touched on, there are no shortage of priorities that organizations and institutions have. And of course, sometimes when something's perceived as being sort of forward thinking, I guess, and a brand new technology, it can perhaps seem like, oh, we can wait and see how others do it, and perhaps kind of jump on this a little bit later. Mike, you suggested there the technology already exists, though. I mean, where should this rank on people's priority lists? Because, like Meagan said, there's the only reason many organizations will provoke change is if they can see incentives, not just for the individuals, not just for students, not just for learners, but also for the organizations themselves. So how should they think about priorities?
Well, there's the philosophical answer to that, which is largely falls on deaf ears. It's because it's for learners, you should do it. That's okay, but in the practical sense, it really is an ROI kind of question at institutions. For everyone who's working in higher ed, there are a million priorities. So Meagan, at your institution, you're fortunate that you've chosen to prioritize this. And at Western Governors, you're fortunate that this is central to what you do. Many other organizations still have to come up to that decision and face it. And some of the research we're trying to do right now is, what is that return on investment? And what is that value added for the organization? I think that the research that points toward students will get jobs is incomplete. I think we're tending to focus back on what we've talked about here is value to the learner. And that does resonate with faculty. That does eventually resonate with administration. It just has to be translated clearly. And then there are a number of stakeholders in higher education who value from this, ranging from the faculty to the administration to the institutional research folks, the Career Center, you can go on down the list of areas inside an institution who benefit clearly from this. It's not a sentence, it's a paragraph narrative. You can't just easily say it. It does take a little bit of a dialogue. And I think that's where the work goes.
Again, so yes, even if one is not buying into kind of, like Mike said, the larger societal goals of this credential evolution, let's talk about that landscape of competing priorities. So implementing digital credentials on its own may not seem sexy or like the it thing, right? But it is an infrastructure move that has the potential to enable those other priorities. I'm a big fan of analogies, right? Especially since I don't have the tech background. As I've been learning this stuff, I've been trying to like make sense of it myself. And I think about it as, you know, like when we went from copper phone lines to fiber, right? Like you could still do everything you were currently doing, but that opened up so many doors for us moving forward, right? So what are those priorities? Is student enrollment and recruitment your top concern? Are you in need of opening resources in terms of time, cost, and administrative overhead? Are you looking for ways to collaborate and align better with workforce sector? Are you struggling with student motivation and engagement or transfer articulation, or wondering how new ways to use data for decision making? I mean, digitizing credentials has the potential really to move all of those priorities forward to the benefit of the institution.
The other thing that I will add on to that, and I love every piece of that in terms of motivations for the institutional perspective, is we know that the landscape in digital credentials is very large, if not a bit unwieldy. And having the digital infrastructure to be able to do this so that your university can also make the credentials that they are issuing transparent. I think there's a value proposition there for really getting your credentials out there and known in the ecosystem. Like employers today, it's very few and far between that are out there asking for very specific like micro credentials in this kind of new, era of micro credentialing. But I think a lot of it is because they don't understand higher ed. They're not totally clear on what a credential represents that someone can do. And I think from that perspective as well, it really helps with the promotion, brand, and transparency of your credentials, and to get them more well known as well.
What does the idea of having a single wallet mean here? Because I'm sort of thinking we'll have had like a little later some closing thoughts around how to turn some of this from theory into practice, and had a demo on how somebody can actually claim these credentials and put them to use in applying for a job and demonstrating the skills. I wonder, based on what you said there about, what is this, just to reiterate, what is the real value of unifying this through, for example, a wallet? I mean, put it into practical terms, for anybody listening, what value does that create where you're actually able to collect micro-credential degrees, skills-based credentials in one place? And what does that mean in terms of how quickly you could potentially apply for a job and advance in a career? Anybody want to take that one?
So I'll take it to start. I'm interested in what the other panelists have to say about this. I think that in my mind, it's less about centering around a singular technology or application and more around getting unified on a sense of principles and practices that would need to be within this system in order to verify that a credential is what someone says it is. And that's everything from, legal aspects to the interoperability of a credential to the digital verification and trust that's built in. I am a proponent that if we really are going to try and get this ecosystem singing, we're going to have multiple wallets, multiple avenues for people to be able to share and distribute those credentials. But there's a lot of infrastructure work that will need to happen in order to make that day possible. And I think Velocity is doing a lot to make headway in that space.
Yeah, it really should be technology agnostic, credential agnostic, all of that. Again, fan of the analogies. So I was describing it to people who, just hearing about this concept for the first time, that think back to when kind of like the internet came together, right? Like how it started with these little pieces, these little groups working on different aspects of it, and it kind of blossomed into the internet as we know it today and how ubiquitous it is. But it really doesn't matter browser you're using to access the information. You know, I mean, you might have your preferences, but there are different ways to get in there and see what you're trying to see and do what you're trying to do.
And I'll just pile on top of that by saying the idea of a wallet versus the idea of a one wallet for everyone in the world, that's, you know, that's a big gap between the two. And I think you're asking sort of somewhere in between there. There has to be more than the individual credentials a student or learner earns and owns at this level, yet there's no big bucket big enough in the world to contain them all. And so what's happening with organizations like Velocity is to try and figure out that ground of what's a practical way that is interoperable across the globe and meets the needs of both academic learners and employed learners. And I think that's the sweet spot. And it's not easy, but to me, that's better than saying everyone in the world is going to have this one wallet kind of thing. And I think Velocity's done a pretty good job of not kicking those tires yet. It's a good plan.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's why we talk about the internet of careers, and I think that's you know, unifying around that idea is key here. Well, look, it's been really interesting hearing all of your perspectives. Really appreciate your time, and I know that if anybody who's watching has any questions, I'm sure you're all very open to people reaching out and connecting with you. So, thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Naomi Szekeres, and I'm the head of Global Education Ecosystem Strategy here at Velocity Network Foundation. First, I want to say thank you so much to our speakers and presenters today, and I want to say thank you to everyone for joining us for this hour of learning. I want to answer a few commonly asked questions that come up in our ecosystem. And the first is, who can participate? And we want to share that every one of us can participate in this ecosystem. We're all learners, workers. In addition, the many of us on this call that represent institutions of higher learning, all institutions, training providers, educators can issue credentials on Velocity Network. In addition, employers can participate in this ecosystem, and you don't have to have a fancy HRIS system to participate. We have an online service that can run verifications, and you can even install the credentialing agent yourself and manage your credentialing and your verifications. So there's a lot of options for us. I'd also like to mention that institutions are often our biggest employers in certain geographies. So you can create a closed loop ecosystem right there. The next question that comes up a lot in Velocity is, how much is it going to cost? And it's important to note and walk away with the understanding that Velocity built this tool set to build the ecosystem and to enable so many possibilities and futuristic business models to be built on top of Velocity. So Velocity's components are completely open source, royalty free, and they're accessible to everyone. And then, of course, your next question might be, well, where do I get started? And you can get started with any one of our members or even your current credentialing platform or tech stack. You can ask, are you Velocity enabled? And what's your roadmap to become Velocity enabled? And if you need help navigating the ecosystem, we have a number of nonprofits in our membership that help organizations navigate competency-based models, credentialing, and the such. In addition, if you have questions, you can reach out to the Velocity ecosystem team. Our information's in the chat, and we'll be happy to help you navigate so that you can achieve your goals on Velocity. With that, we look forward to seeing everyone join us on the 14th, where we get into a little bit of more of the how Velocity works, and we'll showcase some of our members that are building solutions on top of Velocity. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the 14th.